of talking about the speakers, I just want to thank our amazing food producers for this harvest table that they put together.
Yeah.
Wasn't it fabulous? And there's a lot of it has been snapped up very quickly, but there's still quite a few nice things available there. So you're welcome to grab a plate. Even while we're talking, it's very casual. You're welcome to do that. We're going to hear from Mark Stevens, and he corrected me. I thought that Mark was doing the wine for Stanford Hills, and he is involved with it. But actually, Deep Rooted Wines is his brand, and so that's something that I got wrong, and now I understand how it all works. Is that Deep Rooted Wines is his brand that he's got with these amazing wines that he sources. He'll obviously tell us more, but he sources from regenerative vineyards, which is amazing, and it's zero sulfur added wines. So if you're looking to enjoy a glass of wine without the chemical headache afterwards, I assume, this is the wine to enjoy.
First of all, it's really nice to be here. Thank you very much, Robyn, for putting this all together. It's really cool to have so many people here with the same sort of goal in mind, where I'm pretty sure that this is the reason that we're all here. Everyone is trying to find a new way of living, a new way to sort of approach the way that we engage with life, to start to eat more healthily, to start to live more connected with nature, with the environment around us. And we are very privileged that we are in such a small town, such a small place where we are, a lot of people in this room are farmers. And we are in that way able to actually connect with the land in such a more natural way. I grew up in a city, and I grew up knowing that food comes from the supermarket. And even if I had the intent back then to want to find pasture-raised chicken or organically grown vegetables from a local farm, it wasn't possible, because where do you go? I would have had, I suppose I could have found it, but here it just seems to be right in front of you, and it comes from right down the road. And it's really cool to see that such a thing is rising. And yes, it is changing around the world. People have started to notice that food quality has decreased, the nutrition that you find in everything has gone down. Farming has had a principle of try to produce as much as possible at as low a cost as possible. And this has resulted in a situation where we end up spending more and more on healthcare than ever before. Yes, I am a viticulturist, but I'm really going to just talk about some general ideas about regenerative farming. I'm sure that a lot of people do know, but there's some really interesting things that I kind of want to bring in. And another really cool thing that I did think about before coming through here was that we don't all need to do everything. In this community, there is someone who's taken upon themselves to raise the best chicken that you can possibly find. There's someone who's taken upon themselves to raise the best lamb or whatever it may be. Someone has chosen that as their thing. And if we work as a community, you find what works best for you, and we all exchange. Not every person has to reinvent the wheel every time. Now, I'd like to draw some parallels between human health and plant health, if I may, because it's going to tie in with Dr. Fenwick's talk later. I've come to see the soil environment essentially as the gut of plants. So within our guts, we have got this host of bacteria, and that bacteria works to break down our food and supply nutrients to our villi, essentially the roots, the role that roots play in the soil, and that way our nutrients are transformed. So there's three stages. Your bacteria is going to break down the mechanically broken down food into smaller particles and ultimately into the minerals available to your gut that can take up. The same thing happens in the soil. So a leaf from a tree falls onto the ground. That leaf is colonized by fungi and bacteria, and it is broken down. Earthworms may come along and do the mechanical breakdown role, or a cow may come past and stand on it. And then once it enters the soil, it very quickly gets broken down. The bacteria comes along, rips it, slowly takes it apart, or very fast, depending how healthy the soil is, and ultimately turns it into the minerals, the forms that plants can absorb. And then the plants take up those nutrients and they grow. So that's basically it. Our stomachs work in the same way as the soil does. The roots act as the lily does. And I'm basically just illustrating this to make us, to kind of just draw some comparisons so we can understand that these things aren't too different. And if you can understand one, you can quite simply understand the other. What I want you to become aware of is that process, how many steps it had to go through before that leaf from the tree could be fed back to the roots. There was a lot of steps involved. When the chemical agricultural revolution came along, there was this great idea that why wait for this process to happen? Why not just jump ahead and supply the plant directly with the mineral that it needs to grow, directly with the nitrate, with the phosphate, or whatever it is that the plant actually needs to grow, and then we don't have to wait for bacteria, earthworms, and fungi to do their role to get it into the plant. And this was a great idea. It worked. In the first days of chemical fertilizers, it was an absolute revolution because the soils were healthy and then the plants were given additional nutrients. And really, like the very first applications of fertilizers for the first, even up to 10 years, were incredible. Plants grew at rates never seen before. But as this went on, the soil environment was no longer needed. This whole interaction of fungi and bacteria was actually not needed anymore. And it started to die out because now essentially they weren't getting any of the food that needs to pass through them. The food was given straight to the plant. The plant said, sorry guys, thanks for the interaction, but I'm all good. And eventually we ended up with an environment of, that was quite a diverse environment with all these bacteria. We ended up with a true monoculture, literally just soil acting as a place to hold the roots that then could be fed with these minerals. And it was only once the soil had actually died out that we started to notice any problems. Because this situation that I've just told you about the bacteria and fungi breaking down things into minerals that give to the plants, is actually a lot more complicated than that. That is one way of the transfer. The other way of the transfer is that the plant tells the soil environment what it is experiencing. So it can say, listen guys, I'm feeling a bit of fungal pressure here. It sends root exudates, which are enzymes and chemical compounds, out into the soil that then may get further distributed by the fungi connecting to their roots. And the bacteria says, all right, cool, we got you. If you're having a fungal problem, let me go grab some silica and whatever else we need to strengthen your cell walls so that the hyphae of the fungi, the attacking fungi, can't penetrate, build the immune system of the plant. Same thing happens if the plant is being attacked by an insect. It sends a signal down. Bacteria and the fungi go, cool, we've got you because this is a symbiotic relationship we've got going on. We're going to give you a whole bunch of compounds that are going to make your leaves unpalatable to the insect that's trying to eat you. So it really was, that is essentially an immune system. The plant is sending a signal saying, listen, I'm feeling a problem. The bacteria, the gut environment, is responding by sending back what it needs. And once the soil environment had died out, suddenly we were starting to realize, I'm talking about in general agriculture now, we were suddenly needing to use more fungicides and insecticides than ever before. As we got further and further into the chemical agriculture cycle, we had killed out the soil, and we're now starting to need more and more chemicals in order to keep our plants healthy. Essentially, you can think of it as how cattle kept in a feedlot and just supplied with antibiotics constantly to keep them healthy. Now people are they're realizing, okay, cool, this is not sustainable. We're using more chemicals than we've ever had to just to get our crops to grow. And there's clearly something missing, and people are starting to understand that we do need to shift back. So the idea is to try and move back to how things were before chemical agriculture. And this is a great idea, of course it is, but you've also got to be very careful, and now I'm particularly speaking to the farmers in the room. You have to be very careful how you make that transition. And to do this, I want to draw another analogy to human health. Imagine you were fed your entire life, or at least for the last 10, 15 years, with a needle in your arm. You were fed intravenously like you would be in a hospital bed. And one day you decide, no, this doesn't make any sense. I want to take this needle out of my arm and I want to start eating and living healthily. So you pull the needle out of your arm, and you make yourself the most perfect organic broccoli stir fry with every finely balanced herb, the healthiest meal you could possibly imagine. Your gut is not going to know what to do with that food because there is no environment in your stomach in order to actually process it. So you would probably end up getting really sick. And the same thing happens in the soil environment. Suddenly farmers go, we're going to go organic, or we're going natural. And they stop all of their chemical fertilizers and they just apply compost, or they apply fish emulsion, and all of these things to the soil. And in the first year, things look pretty good. The second year, things, depending on your crop, if you're doing sort of annual cash crops, the crop can start to fail in the second year, and then when it comes to vineyards and orchards, you really start to see the fail in the third year. Because what you need to do is you need to actually get that environment going. And the soil environment takes a long time to regenerate. If you were to if you wanted to make it to happen quickly, you'd have to put down like 60 tons of compost a hectare. And as Pete Stewart will tell you, that's really not an affordable thing to do. So what you need to do is you need to start to inoculate the soil. Just like you would with your stomach, you need to start taking in probiotics, prebiotics, and getting that environment going again so that it can start to process food. You need to do the same with the soil environment. Don't throw away your chemicals just yet. Put down some compost. Start feeding fish emulsion. Make compost teas. Put them out constantly, but then slowly decrease your chemical usage. You know, maybe in the first year you use only 60% of the nitrate fertilizers that you would have. The following year you use 40%, and then 20%, and then 10%. And that way you can actually maintain your yields and you can make a slow, gradual, and healthy transition. I've seen so many examples of farms trying to pull the plug in 1 year and nearly lose everything. I know one farm in the Swartland producing 10 tons of grapes, sorry, not in the Swartland, in Robynn De Klerk producing 10 to 15 tons of grapes a hectare of quality stuff, decided to go organic. And within 3 years, they were down to 2 tons a hectare, and that's just not sustainable. And now this is where the whole regenerative approach comes in, because regenerative farming does not say that it's not a strict set of rules. Regenerative farming has one basic philosophy. Let's build soil health. And building soil health there are a number of steps that I'm going to go through to get there, but building soil health is essentially a way to, it's essentially that's the philosophy. And with that, you can use whatever is at your disposal and whatever you can afford as well in order to actually make things work. So there are steps that you can take to make this process better. The first thing that I'd like to point out, just because I've raised this one point, is move away from anything systemic. That is probably the very first step in the regenerative journey that I could recommend to anyone. Because whatever moves through the sap of the plant is going to go through and down into the roots, and the roots are interacting with bacteria and fungi, the very thing that you're trying to encourage, and they will affect that environment. Switch out glyphosate, which, as we all know, is the worst possible herbicide, but use a herbicide which only burns the leaves on the surface and does not travel through. That way you can actually end up with a nice mulch layer on the soil surface and you don't kill the roots. So as that plant slowly dies, because now the top of it is all dead, maybe it'll regrow, but the root environment is left intact, constantly interacting with the soil environment.